Hey everybody, what's going on? Hell Knight here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Of course, the week I go out of town is the week that Riot releases, or reveals rather, K'Sante, the Pride of Nezuma. If my voice sounds a little weird, it's because I'm using a different microphone than normal, but either way, I still wanted to get this out because I think K'Sante has a really interesting kit. I think there's a lot of things that he's doing that are quite unique, and I wanted to break it down for you guys and let you know what I'm thinking about our newest champion. So let's go ahead and start talking about K'Sante's kit. And unlike normally when I do this, I always start from passive and then work QWER. I do want to start with K'Sante's R, or at least the passive component of his ultimate. Importantly, after casting his ultimate, K'Sante becomes all out, which means he loses a percentage of his maximum health, bonus armor, and bonus MR, but he gains attack damage, omnivamp, and gets differences in his abilities. Now, this is very important because this is the dichotomy by which K'Sante is going to live or die. In one form, he is a big, beefy, tanky type character. In another form, he's sort of a skirmisher. He loses a lot of his defenses in favor of more offense and more ability to duel, and this is going to be very important for how you play the character. But let's go ahead and rewind and take it back to K'Sante's passive, which is called Dauntless Instinct. His damaging abilities mark enemies for a short duration, and attacking a marked enemy consumes the mark to deal damage plus max health physical damage. This is pretty simple to understand. Hit a guy, mark a guy, auto-attack him to consume the mark for bonus damage. We've seen this before. This means that K'Sante is going to want to be weaving auto-attacks in with his other ability hits in order to deal constant damage, which is quite nice, especially for a tankier character, having this ability to do damage. Importantly, this is also physical damage, not magic damage, meaning that itemizing armor against K'Sante is going to be very important. If K'Sante is all out, however, attacking a marked enemy deals physical damage and additional max health true damage instead, meaning that he sort of doesn't care who he's hitting when he's transformed. He just is going to do damage to them regardless. And this is a big deal because that means, again, he's a skirmisher. He's supposed to be able to hit anything he wants and do damage to him, and this passive will allow him to do that when he goes all out. K'Sante's Q is Natofo Strikes. He slams his weapon, dealing physical damage in a small area around him, and briefly slows the enemies he hits. And if an enemy is hit, he gains a stack, and at 2 stacks, he will instead fire a shockwave that pulls enemies. Now, this is an interesting Yasuo-like ability. Hit a guy, get a stack, hit a guy, get a stack, and then your next stack does something, but it's sort of a reverse of the Yasuo ability. Instead of knocking them up, he pulls them towards him, which actually allows him to then get you in range, so he can start proccing his passive, or just to have a crowd control component in general. It's a very interesting type ability, and this is going to be your bread and butter. Q an enemy, proc your passive, Q an enemy, proc your passive. You can kind of get a lot of damage off in this regard. Importantly to note, though, K'Sante is a mana champion, so you do have to be very careful, but it does mean that if you have high amounts of mana, you can spam this ability and do high degrees of damage. But importantly, this also does not do percent health damage. You have to be proccing your passive to get that, so unlike Poppy, who can just kind of walk at you and hit Hammer Shock whenever she wants, there is a little bit more that K'Sante is going to have to be doing. If you are all out, however, this ability's cooldown is reduced, but it no longer slows targets hit. Essentially, you are trading utility in the form of the crowd control components of this ability for damage. Now, it's unclear to me if you still get the pull-in effect when you're at 3 stacks with an all-out Q. My assumption, though, is that the entire CC component of the ability disappears in favor of just being more damage. So we'll see how that plays out, though, in-game. K'Sante's W is Pathmaker. When you start charging the ability, you become unstoppable and take reduced damage, and when you release it, you ram forward, dealing a percentage of max health physical damage, knocking back and stunning enemies you pass through based on the charge time. If K'Sante's all out, however, this ability's cooldown is refreshed, the damage reduction is increased, and it deals additional physical damage based on charge time, and the charge and dash speed are doubled. Importantly to note, the CC component does go away. I did double check this with the trailer, which thank you, Riot, for giving us a trailer that actually shows the champion gameplay and including the entire HUD, so we can kind of tell what the character does as opposed to having to ask a lot of questions. But so we do know that the dash, if he's all out while using W, does not have the crowd control component any longer. It's basically just there for additional damage. Now, this is going to be a very potent ability for K'Sante. If he's building durable and you get DR, you just become unkillable. We've all seen this with Alistar, who presses R when he already has a full tank build, and he just does not die for the entire duration of his ultimate because 60% reduced damage, he's already got a lot of durability. It's really hard to kill that character, and K'Sante isn't even a support, right? This is a solo laner champion. He's going to have a really powerful ability to just kind of say, nah, I'm not going to take damage from anything that you're doing while I'm charging Pathmaker. The CC component is very short-ranged, but it does mean that if you're coming into Kasante's space, that he can weather the initial hits, then dash forward in order to do the damage, get the stun, get the knockback, and then be able to start wailing on you from there with his passive damage. So that's kind of interesting. The damage reduction is increased on the all-out form, but recall that the all-out form also has significantly lower defenses, so that feels sort of justified, and this is going to be your all-out get me out of jail free card. If you are all out and you're taking a bunch of damage or you see a hard-hitting enemy ability coming in, you have to press W. It's going to allow you to sponge it off, similar to Master Yi Meditate, but if you don't have W available, you're going to take a bunch of damage. Neatly, though, Riot have said that the cooldown is refreshed when you go all out. So you can watch an enemy come in when you're in your normal form, tank it with your W, then go all out, and you get W back in order to have it again for another dash and the ability to do a bunch of damage and potentially reduce the damage that you're going to be taking. So that's kind of nice. This is definitely going to be the ability to track on Kasante, both offensive and defensive use cases. If you're playing against him, if you're playing as him, this is the important cooldown for Kasante, and you really want to be tracking this one because this feels like his sort of most important basic ability. Kasante's E is Footwork. He dashes, gaining a shield for a short duration, but if he dashes to an ally, the distance is significantly increased, and the ally also gets shielded. Other spells can be cast during this ability. Now, the wording on this is a little weird. It looks like it's a free targeted dash, but if there's an ally in range, you can dash a little bit further, and you also will shield them and yourself at the same time, and you can go through walls with this if you're dashing to an ally specifically, as opposed to dashing just for free on your own. It's a little odd, and I kind of want to try this out in game before I try to speculate on it further, but suffice to say, Kasante, as a tanky character, he has an on-demand shield, which is going to be quite nice to help him just sponge off damage that he takes. Importantly as well here, the all-out ability, the ability's dash speed is increased, and if you dash to a targeted location, it has increased range and can go over walls. Basically, if you're all out, you get just the free dash through stuff without having to worry about having an ally there, but you also don't shield the ally from the sound of it. You still get the shield yourself, but you don't shield the ally. This ability can also have another ability cast during its duration, so you can do something like Footwork as you're casting your Tofo strikes for an automatic slow in order to walk in a range and get your passive proc, or in order to get the pull back, for example, you can Q minion wave twice, then when you have this charged up, you can dash into range for a Q, which you can be casting during the E in order to get the immediate pull back. It seems like there are some interesting combos that you can have this work with. But this is definitely going to be an interesting ability. This is his more utility-focused ability, probably a last max for Kasante, but definitely is going to give him a good amount of mobility. And importantly here, the fact that it shields allies, to me, says that Kasante is going to be played more of as a Warden tank when he's not all out. That is to say, he is a defensive tank. He waits for enemies to come to him so he can protect his friends. And the rest of his kit kind of contributes to this. Tofo Strikes obviously has a pull back, but it means that if enemies are trying to run past you, you can pull them back towards you. You do have the ability of sponging off damage if they come at you, so you can block that with Pathmaker and then dash through and stun them. Footwork lets you shield an ally, so if you're dashing back to an ally to help peel for them, you're going to be able to shield them at the same time, plus you have the increased range, plus you can go through walls. There's a lot of things that are going to make Kasante better as a defensive tank, and especially when we get to his ultimate, that is another ability that's really allowing him to play as a defensive-oriented tank, as opposed to an offensive-oriented tank where I can't really see how he's going to initiate. But let's stop stalling and just talk about All Out already. He shatters his Natofos, dealing physical damage, knocking back an enemy champion. If they hit a wall, they go all the way through the wall, take a greater amount of physical damage, and are briefly stunned. However, regardless of whether or not Kasante knocks you through a wall, he will dash after the enemy and then go all out. Now, I did look at this in the trailer. It looks like Kasante gains full mana when this ability is activated, but his mana slowly drains over time while it is active, and he can cancel it at any time. So Kasante at any point can say, I no longer wish to be all out. I'm going to reactivate the ability and stop doing that, but also there is a timer on the ability, so he can be all out for quite some time. Now, this is kind of a neat one, because I really think that this is why Kasante looks more like a defensive tank to me, because Kasante has the ability of isolating enemy champions. If you try to dive his backline, Kasante tackles you all the way through a wall, and then goes damage mode and says, no, you're going to fight me instead of them. This also has some interesting offensive ability. If Cassante can find a flank onto like a squishy backline member, he tackles them through a wall. They're now isolated from their team, and Cassante's gone sicko mode for extra damage. And now it's not just like a tank trying to wet noodle slap you to death. This is a skirmisher who's actually got a fair amount of kill threat on him. Now, importantly, Cassante does give up a lot of his durability. So if, for example, the ally has a Shen teleport on top of them or took a Yuumi with them through the wall, then you're in a 1v2. Maybe this doesn't end well for Cassante after all, but you do have the ability of sort of shedding your all-out effect and instead just go for, hey, I just want to go back to being a regular tank, guys, because I like the utility and the ability to tank some hits. So this is really interesting, and I really like this style of play that Riot have given Cassante, where they've said, this is a tank, and I did totally predict this, by the way, but this is a tank, but you have the option of saying, I'm going to go full damage mode. I'm giving up some durability, I'm giving up all of my utility in exchange for just raw kill threat. And Cassante determining when to go all out and how long to stay all out is going to be the important thing for this character to figure out, because he really needs to be able to weigh his bonus defenses versus his ability to actually do damage. Obviously, you don't just want to try and wet noodle slap an AD carry to death, they'll probably kill you, but also if you go all out, are you going to take too much damage and actually just die before you have the kill threat? It also means that Cassante is a tank that actually has some teeth into top lane matchups. We're used to bruisers and other fighters being able to kind of abuse tanks top lane because tanks can't really hurt them back. Cassante has the ability to hurt you back, and hurt you back very badly, especially because going all out gives him the refresh on his W for the DR. There's a lot of things that I think are really going to make Cassante quite powerful, but it's going to take a lot of very careful piloting. I really don't feel like Cassante is the kind of champion that you can just pick up and play. He really feels like the kind of champion that's going to reward skillful play and a lot of time and energy put into the champion, which I think is actually quite nice. I really do appreciate that about the character. In terms of the character's potential professional play aspirations, I think Cassante has a lot of really neat tools. I think there's a lot of good utility that he's got. I think he's a tank with DR, which is always phenomenal. Just look at Leona and Alistar, and they're even supports. This is intended to be a solo laner, which I think makes him quite nice. I'm not sure about his ability to jungle. It does feel like you would want to be able to go all out in the jungle to clear faster to then be able to gank better. Cassante doesn't really have that ability, and again, he's a defensive tank. It's sort of like a Shen jungle. Yeah, the Shen will pop out of the jungle to try and gank you, but all he has is Shadow Dash, and after that, he doesn't do anything. And Cassante's Pathmaker stops him from moving while he's charging it, so I don't really see how he's going to be able to gank from the jungle, so probably exclusively in the top lane. But I still think he's a very interesting character with the ability to do lots of damage, with the ability to be a very beefy frontline character, and as a result, I think he has a shot at pro play depending on where his numbers end up landing. In terms of his narrative, realistically, Cassante doesn't do that much for us. His lore actually isn't even out yet, which is interesting, but we did get the full trailer where we saw Cassante's partner basically leave him because he was too prideful, which ties right back into his title, the Pride of Nezuma. And Cassante had to sort of learn from there. It looks like he also invented the idea that you could go all out, that you can shatter your Natofos for better damage. The fact that he has these really fancy Natofos that sort of regenerate themselves is a neat touch, which then lends itself to that fighting style, which is kind of nice. And he looks like he's the foremost hunter in Nezuma. So this is sort of the big man on campus for Nezuma, which is kind of nice. And he definitely doesn't have any interest at all in the Ascended, so it'll be curious to see what his interactions with Talia and other characters is like. But that's going to be it for me, guys. I'm actually quite excited for Cassante. It's been a while since we've got a new top laner. I'm excited to see what this character can do in game and try him out and see how he does. But you guys will have to let me know if you're excited for him and what you're excited for about him down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.